Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I'd like to share yet another statement from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that teaches us the perspective that we have to have in our world as we go through the journey of life. He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, peace and blessings be upon him, حُفَّةُ الْجَنَّةُ بِالْمَكَارِهِ وَحُفَّةُ النَّارِ بِالشَّهَوَاتِ. That paradise, the path to heaven, is paved through hardship, through difficulties. And the path to the fire, to hell, is surrounded by desires, or is paved by lowly desires, selfish desires, egotistic desires. And this is narrated by Imam Muslim. What that teaches us is that oftentimes in life, we are faced with challenges that are difficult for us. And sometimes we have a hard time understanding, why is God doing this to me? But in reality, in the long term, in the bigger picture, there may be some good in it. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is teaching us here that the road to paradise is one that requires effort, one that requires a person to overcome the difficulties of one's own ego, or even the difficulties that one faces in the world. So for example, when a person has some difficulty come into their life, it is very hard to be patient at that moment. It's easy to let go and to express oneself in a way that might not even be productive, but that's the easier way. But for a person to compose themselves and to be patient and to be optimistic, that is very heavy on the ego. But that is actually what is better for the human being. It's better for them emotionally, it's better for them spiritually, it's better for them mentally, that a person controls their initial reaction in a way that is pleasing to God and in a way that is composed and good for them. In another way, to say that the road to paradise is paved with difficulties is that it requires an effort on our part to do those things that are pleasing to God, such as acts of worship and prayer and charity. When a person gives charity, for example, their first response is, you know what, I could use this money myself. Times are getting a little bit tight. I need to get this and that for home. I need to do groceries. I don't know if I'm going to have enough. These are the thoughts that begin to come to one's mind, even if they're only giving a little bit in charity. But it takes a strong person, it takes someone who is optimistic and in control of themselves to say, I'm going to give charity, and I'm going to figure out other aspects of my life to make it work. But that takes effort, that takes discipline. And that's one of the meanings behind the road to paradise is paved with hardships and difficulties, because you have to overcome your own ego. You have to overcome the whisperings of the devil. In another way, carrying out the rights of other people. One of the most difficult things for a human being is to give all others their rights, because dealing with other people is hard. So you might have a family member who's particularly hard to get along with. We're taught by the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that you still have to be good to that family member, that you still have to reach out, even if it's hard to do so. But that is what is more pleasing to God the Exalted. In another case, he told us, peace and blessings be upon him, that it is forbidden for believers to not talk to one another for 3 days out of anger with one another. So in other words, if two people get into an argument, and one person says, I'm right, and the other person says, I'm right, and I'm not going to talk to you until you come and apologize to me. If they go beyond 3 days being upset at one another and refusing to talk to one another, it becomes sinful in the sight of God. But it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of humility. It takes a lot of strength for someone to say, you know what, I was wrong, I'd like to reach out and apologize, and I want to mend our relationship, and I want to repair our relationship. And the Prophet told us the person who reaches out to reconcile first is the one who's rewarded by God, who is better in the sight of God. But that's not easy. But that's very difficult. And most people can go for years without ever trying to repair that relationship because they don't want to face the bitterness of overcoming their own selfishness. And lastly, having patience in all kinds of aspects, in life, in acts of worship, in times of difficulty, and so forth. وَحُفَّةِ النَّارِ بِالشَّهَوَاتِ. And the path to the fire is paved through lowly desires. The human being, if you look at any aspect of life, the human being is successful by disciplining their own selves. So let me give you an example. Someone who wants to do well academically, they have to discipline themselves to study regularly, to prepare for exams, to do assignments on time. But if that person gave in to their desire to watch movies every single night, or hang out with friends, or play basketball, or whatever their hobbies might be, and they never gave time to their academic study, they wouldn't be successful. If someone wants to commit themselves to be getting in shape, then they have to discipline themselves. They can't eat certain things, they work out at certain times in the day, they take care of themselves. The same goes for our relationship with God, our spiritual development, our spiritual refinement. When we give in to our desires, we begin to harm our own selves. When we give in to every single desire that crosses our mind, we harm our success in this life, and we harm our success in the next life. And also another meaning is that if a person gives in to greed or selfishness, where their desire is to get ahead of everyone else at everyone else's expense. So if I can lie to get ahead of someone else, I'm going to do that because that's what I desire. That's my lowly desire. My greed fuels my drive to beat everyone else, even if it's in ways that are not ethical. Or someone who is arrogant, giving in to the selfish desire of arrogance, that I'm better than everyone else, and everyone else has to treat me in a good way, and I don't have to respond to them in the same way. That these are the kinds of character traits that lead someone closer and closer to self-destruction. Whereas the believer is someone who looks for the good, prefers others over themselves, prefers what God requires of them over their own selfish desires, and refines their soul. And a person who does that will find happiness in this life and happiness in the hereafter, in the life to come. God tells us in the Quran, فَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى وَآثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا فَإِنَّ الْجَحِيمَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. In the Quran, God tells us, whoever prefers the life of this world. And what does that mean? It means that they want every single aspect of joy and of greed that they can get in this world, even if it's unethical, even if it harms others, even if they harm their own selves. فَإِنَّ الْجَحِيمَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. That their end place will be the fire, because that's their lifestyle led them to that. وَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى وَآثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا فَإِنَّ الْجَحِيمَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. And whoever is mindful and fearful and conscious of the station of their Lord, they're conscious of God, they're conscious of what God desires from them and requires from them and wants from them, and they discipline their own selfish desires, then paradise is their end place. So we learn from this hadith even how we deal with our own desires, and how we have patience in the face of tribulation, and how we discipline ourselves to be people of spiritual refinement, people of beautiful character, people who are just and fair in our dealings with others, people who do not give in to every selfish desire, and in doing so enriching the lives of others, and enriching our own life, and enriching our own hearts, and enriching our experience in the hereafter by attaining paradise by God's will. So we ask God that He makes us people of discipline, that He makes us people who work for the good, and who strive for that which is better, and people who discipline the evil inclinations within our own selves, and He makes us people of paradise and protects us from punishment and shame and corruption in this world and the next. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.